Hello, everyone. I'm going to deviate from regular programming, i.e. the Motivating Light series, because this happened this weekend and I think it's worth looking at. It's something that you may learn from and it's still fresh in my mind. So I was at a marathon this weekend in Hillcrest. Leanne was doing the half marathon. I was there to support. So as usual, the camera was with me and I was taking photos. And I was shooting on my Fujifilm XT-5 with the 16 to 55 f2.8 from Photo Freedom. And there's a lot of talk quite often about how crop sensors cannot or don't perform well in sport situations because you need such high shutter speed and therefore you need higher ISO and there's noise and blah, blah, blah. Guys, there's denoise now. The days have passed. Yes, a full frame sensor would capture more light, but again, you got to balance what you can afford. And what I can afford to get me out there and shoot is far more important than fawning over some camera that I'll never be able to afford. So what I can afford gets me out there, allows me to shoot more pictures. So I grow as a photographer. That's what matters to me. And these pictures are proof that crop sensor does just fine. So first off, let's go through a little video clip. I want to show you what the environment looked like. Bear in mind, this is absolutely raw out of my phone. So, very important here. On the left, you have the sun rising. Now, my whole plan here was that there's this tunnel of trees. I'm going to shoot low and I'm going to get perspective. I'm going to use leading lines. But there's a couple of other really important things to consider when you're shooting sport photography, and especially when it's not in an indoor environment or on a field, on a hockey field, a rugby field. With something like this, where you've got runners on a public road and supporters and all these wonderful things happening, spatial awareness is super, super important. So I had known up front that this tunnel of trees existed in Hillcrest. And I knew that I could get a cool shot out of it, especially in the morning because it would have been just at sunrise. So I went down and I positioned myself in a way to consider all of the elements that would come into play. So if you look at this image, right, I was on the opposite side of the road to the runners. I found a space where I could use these two trees as framing, where the supporters were out of the way as much as possible, and where, most importantly, the light coming through the trees, it'll be dappled light, but at times would hit the athletes and light them up for me. So that was the critical thing. And it took a lot of spatial awareness. And why I say that is these conditions are changing constantly. So let's look at some examples, right? Oh, I just want you to note that I obviously took some liberties with making some of the images look a certain way. To explain that, I wanted to look cool, cinematic, and, but at the same time, still represent reality. So as far as editing goes, I don't do a lot of color editing. I tried as much as possible to show you what the light did. I did have to raise shadows a bit because the light coming through the holes in the trees were very bright. So I had to shoot for highlights here to protect those highlights, which meant the shadows were going to be dark. They were not crushed, but they were dark. I accept that. But if this was a pure photojournalism image, I would probably be looking at something more like that image, right? Much more real. And that's shot in an Eterna profile. That's got zero distraction removal, absolutely no manipulation, the sort of stuff that in competition is allowed. But for the images that I'm going to go through, I firstly had the luxury of how I used the light in these specific positions. And where that was more about capturing the lead runner or what have you, you could see the media and everyone going on. These were about capturing the action and telling the story. So I removed some of the distractions. I am fine with that. It did not make a major difference to what was going on. You'll see I intentionally left, for example, supporters in the background because there are supporters at these events. But a bright green sign on this gate or a real estate board there, while realistically was there, I removed because this image is to tell a story and to feel the feeling of the moment, and those were the choices I made, right? As far as light goes, these were shot in Provia on the Fujifilm. And for the most part, I haven't done a lot with the color. It's the Provia color that you're seeing. So let's start quickly. Let's start with this image, right? This was the prime example of what I came here for. I knew that we're going to have this tunnel of trees that's going to create this disappearing perspective of leading lines. So I positioned myself dead center on the road. So straight down the center of the road. But at the same time, you've got this wonderful perspective leading line there, and the trees just take you down a tunnel. I waited for a runner to be somewhere in the frame. It's not perfectly on a third, but doesn't bother me very much. Now, the lovely part about this specific image is he was looking at me. In the next one, not so much so, but at the same time, it's still that perspective. You've got that, those leading lines. You've got the runner, tells you the story, tells you what's going on. There's some distraction in the background, but you know what? I'm not going to remove all of it because it detracts too far from reality for me. Then there were these images, there's 3 of them. And I love these images because normally, and I'll use this one as an example, normally I hate it when people light a subject with a flash or an artificial light so much that it doesn't make sense against how dark the background was. But in this case, the light was coming from the left of the image. Okay. The thing is, if you look at where the patches of sunlight are, there were times that she was in shade and times that she was in sun. So I shot test shots as people were going past. I shot test shots with people with white clothes. So I could tell where I needed to set that exposure, that I wasn't going to clip the highlights or blow out the highlights. And what it resulted in was almost like you would with the flash, but it was natural. It was the sun. So I don't mind in this case that the subject is so fully lit because that is what naturally happened. And because of that, you had, just with the right timing, you had the sun hitting the athlete. You can see it in that image. You can see it in that image where I went low and got a bit of a better perspective. You can see it in that image. And the lovely thing is here, he was waving at one of the supporters. So it gives a bit of story to the image. But in all of these, you can see the supporters on the left are in the shadow. So the attention falls on the athlete. And that was purely natural light. It was a case of just finding the spot where that light was going to hit the person, using a few test shots to see when I needed to hit that shutter button, and then getting that moment when they hit that light. And it worked out so nicely. I really love it. Then I decided to take a few perspective shots, but focusing on the feet, the shoes, the leg muscles, the stuff that makes this one slightly out of focus, but I wanted to use it as an example nonetheless. There's a story in his socks, his shoes, the colors, the way they fit together in the scene, and then the 90-degree angle of his legs create a nice geometry. You see the muscles tensing. You can even see the compression in the shoe. I wouldn't submit this for judging at a competition because of the focus not being perfect, but I thought it would have been a nice example to show. And then again, the choice of the background is a dark, solid wall with a gate, but something solid. So there's not too much of light filtering through the back. And I just had to be careful of the light coming through the leaves in the tree. So I exposed for the highlights. Then there's this image. I love this image. And let's be honest, I got lucky with this image. Now, it was darker in there. But to tell the story of this image, I had to bring the shadows up, which I did. But it's the story and the composition that I need to bring your attention to in this image. I had known that we're going to use these trees to create a frame within the frame of the picture. They had the solid background. And the lucky thing that happened here is the set of people coming through this image created that triangle with almost a perfect descending slope and balanced spaces in between. From a storytelling perspective, I got lucky, let's be honest. But I was in the right place. I had the right idea. That is, for me, an epic moment that you don't always get. You've got the front runner, probably a more elite athlete, sprinting down. You've got the middle runner, and I don't mean to make assumptions, but probably a more casual runner in the middle, in less of a pace step, but still moving along. Still, you could see the action. And then you've got a supporting family walking behind them. I mean, how much more do you want to put into the story of an image? I love this. I absolutely love it. So if there's anything I would like taken away from the series of images and the sports photography from this weekend, it's spatial awareness. Look for light that you can use. Look for clear backgrounds. Try and reduce the distractions as much as possible. If you're going to remove elements, which I think is fine to an extent, I like to make sure I keep a balance of realism, but storytelling. So depending on where you're submitting, if you're submitting to a newspaper or pure photojournalism, I wouldn't remove anything. And that's what you saw in the other image. But in these images where I just wanted to tell a sick story and not deviate too much from reality, so leave some things in, I think it's fine. And then as far as the light goes, shoot for the highlights, especially when you've got such dynamic light conditions. Try to protect those highlights and bring up the shadows as much as possible. Obviously, you need a frame rate that's sufficient to capture the motion. Shutter speed. And honestly, I was shooting at f2.8 the whole time. And normally, I guess that's not deep enough, but it seemed to do the job just fine because I was shooting from relatively far away. I wasn't too close to them. Back button focus. I was not shooting on a auto mode. My go-to is back button focus. So I've set it up that I can press down and track on my own. I prefer that. So I track the athlete until that moment when I want the shot. And I think that's about it. But yeah, sports photography. Again, it's being able to see the light, see opportunities, spatial awareness, and you can come out with some pretty cool images. Oh, and play with perspective, play with different angles. Lie on the floor, lie in the middle of the road and almost get killed a few times by cars. Thank you to the guy who saved me a few times. But nonetheless, there's a lot of storytelling that can be done in sport photography, and I hope some of these elements that I considered will help you.